welcome to our monthly webinar. Welcome to those who have joined us before and those who are new. We are excited today to be joined by a special presenter from the Centre of Excellence for the Digital Child. However, before we begin, I'd like to ask you all to firmly place your feet on the ground and to take the time to remind ourselves that every step we take on the unceded lands of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We acknowledge that this place has always been a place of learning and knowledge exchange. And as we join today to learn and grow together, we pay our respects to the oldest living culture in the world who continue to care for this place every day, to guide, support, and to teach us every day. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Thank you for that. Hey, I'm really excited to introduce you to our guest presenter today, and we're really honoured to have Dr. Kate Mannell in the room with us. Hi, Kate. Thanks for coming along.
Hi, Megan. It's really lovely to be here.
Hey, Kate. Kate is a research fellow at the Centre for Excellence for the Digital Child, and Kate's work analyses the design, governance and use of digital technologies with a focus on their role in the everyday lives of families and young people. Kate's research contributes primarily to the Connected Child program and currently includes an examination of public discourses around children's screen time, an analysis of the platformisation of family life, and a project developed in partnership with an Indigenous community organisation, Gunya Meta, also good friends of Learning Without Barriers. Through her work in the centre, Kate hopes to contribute to a more nuanced, inclusive and productive understanding of the intersections between technology and family life. Thanks for joining us today, Kate. I know that this is very topical, having conversations around screen time and anxieties that go with that, but also just some guidance around, interface with technology for our families and our workforce. So thanks for being here, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan, for that welcome, and hi to everybody. It's really lovely to be with you. I've got a lot of admiration for the work that Learning Without Barriers does and that carers do. So it's a real honour to be able to come and spend a little bit of time with you today. So I'm going to just share my slides so that is all set up. Cool. So as Megan said, I'm a researcher at Deakin University, where I'm part of a research centre called the Centre of Excellence for the Digital Child. We are a collection of researchers from 5 different universities across Australia, and our work is really focused on trying to create positive digital childhoods for every child in Australia. Before we start off, I just want to say that I'm going to focus today mostly on younger children, kind of roughly 0 to 8, because that's the area that I know best and that our research centre focuses on. A lot of what I have to say will also apply for kind of older kids and even teens in some instances too, but I'm not going to talk about things like teens and social media like specifically. So just adjust your kind of expectations accordingly. Also, obviously, this is an enormous topic and I'm not going to cover everything, but we are going to have a bit of a Q&A at the end, and you're more than welcome to ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. So I have structured this as a series of questions that I think are often on carers or parents' minds when we're talking about children and technology. What counts as screen time? Is my child's digital media use a problem? What are some strategies for approaching digital media use in children? What about screen time guidelines? And then at the end, kind of where can I learn more? And we'll talk a bit about some of the really good resources that are out there that you can go and draw on for information around more kind of specific topics. So to start with, let's begin with this question. What counts as screen time? Often in conversations about children and technology, screen time is a term that gets used a lot, but it's quite a kind of tricky and almost kind of problematic term because it could mean lots and lots and lots of different kinds of things. So if we're talking about screen time, we could be talking about lots of different kinds of content. We could be talking about TV shows, we could be talking about online video, games, video calls, drawing apps, web search, the list could go on. We could also be talking about lots of different kinds of activities, the different ways that children might engage with screen content. They could be watching, they could be playing, they could be creating, researching, learning. They could be moving. I don't know about you, but I've definitely been in some lounge rooms where toddlers have been doing laps of the lounge or jumping off the couch while they've been watching their favorite show. And then we could also think about the different kinds of contexts as well. So, is the screen use happening while the child is by themselves? Are they with other people? Are they at home? Are they in the waiting room of a medical appointment? And kind of so on and so forth. So the point here isn't necessarily to say, some of these are better and some of them are worse, but that when we use a term like screen time, we have to remember that it could mean a really, really large range of different kinds of things. We could also zoom out further than this and think about how that picture, what screen time is, might also look different depending on the child who's involved. So different kinds of kids are going to engage in different kinds of ways with technology and with different outcomes. So some children might really struggle with transitions away from playing a game or watching a show, and other kids might not find that difficult. Some kids will find some content upsetting, other kids won't find that content upsetting, and so forth. So what screen time means is really going to vary a lot from kid to kid. And so you'll notice that I will use language like screen use or digital media use instead of talking about or using the term screen time. Because for me, I find that talking about screen use or digital media use or technology use, it's a bit of a more kind of open place to start, and it's easier to come at the topic with different kinds of questions and a bit more kind of curiosity about what might be happening, different kinds of experiences, whereas as opposed to talking in terms of screen time. This is not to say that I'm trying to like police people's language. Screen time is a common term. It's fine to use the term screen time. I just put that out there as a way of trying to emphasize. Really, the point is to remember that when we're talking about screen time, it can mean so many different kinds of things. And sometimes that label can make it hard to kind of remember that. So, is my child's digital media use a problem? I think this is a common kind of question or concern that parents and carers can have. I want to point out that I've framed this question in quite a particular way. Often when screen use and harms or problems are talked about, particularly in the media or in kind of online, the question that's asked is like, is screen time harmful for kids? Is technology bad, good or bad for kids? The problem with that as a question is that we have decades of research that tell us it's pretty much impossible to answer because there's so many different kinds of variables and so many different factors that we can't really say there's one effect, for all children. So a better question, and what I think people really want to know usually is my child or the child in my care, is their digital media use a problem? This is a better question because now we're thinking about digital media use in context. You know the child, you know what you want for them, you know how you want, your family life to function, you know what their digital media use looks like. And so this becomes a much more answerable question than is technology good or bad, or is screen use harmful for kids? So great, thank you. But how do we go about kind of answering this question? The best advice that I have seen about this comes from a report which was written by two really great researchers who are based in the UK. I'm going to show you a photo of them in a second. They did a project called Parenting for a Digital Future, and they reviewed a really huge amount of existing research. They also did some research themselves, looking at the role of technology in lots of different kinds of families, the different ways that parents approached making decisions around their children's technology use. And they wrote up this report out of it, and the report has recommendations for industry and for government, but it also has some guidance in there for families. In the report, they kind of make the point that I have around, digital media use varies a lot. We need to be wary of making general rules. And so they suggest that instead parents could ask themselves a series of questions in order to answer this question of, is this child's digital media use a problem? These are the questions that they suggest that parents and carers could ask themselves. Is my child physically healthy and sleeping enough? Is my child connecting socially with family and friends in any form? Is my child engaged with and achieving at school? Is my child pursuing interests and hobbies in any form? And is my child having fun and learning in their use of digital media. When they say, is my child having fun and learning in their use of digital media, they don't just mean learning in the sense of like, are they doing maths games on the iPad? We can think about learning a bit more broadly, you know, is the child exploring their interests in their digital media use? Maybe if they're very young, are they learning songs? Maybe if they're a bit older, are they learning how to negotiate and work together when they're, you know, gaming online with their friends, for example? And so these researchers, they kind of suggest that if you run through that list of questions and the answer is more or less yes, these things are roughly going okay, then they suggest that parents ask themselves, you know, are my fears about digital media use well-founded? Maybe it's that digital media use actually isn't a problem at that particular time. If the answer to these questions is more or less no, these things aren't going well, then they suggest that those parents or carers might need to put in place some regulations, some restrictions in order to address problematic use that's getting in the way of those specific kinds of things. What I really love about these questions is that they encourage us to start from the child that's in front of us instead of starting from a rule, a more general rule that might apply or might not apply to anyone's kind of individual circumstances. So an example of this might be if the answer, you know, is this child sleeping enough? If the answer to that is no, and the next question is, well, okay, is digital media part of the problem? Well, okay, they take their phone into their room at night and, you know, scrolling on Instagram for too long. Then in that case, yeah, probably there needs to be some, you know, boundary put around device use in the bedroom, for example. But that's starting not from, you know, people should never have devices in the bedroom. It's starting from what's happening with that particular child, and is there an issue there, and is digital media part of it, and what can we do to address that particular problem? Another way that we could kind of put this is that basically what we're aiming for is balance. So digital media use can be really fun and enriching. It can have lots of great outcomes for kids. But like anything, if it's excessive, destructive, or this is just someone delivering a package. I don't know if you can hear my dog barking. Like anything, if it becomes excessive, then it can become a problem that takes away from other kinds of things. So what are some strategies then that we could use for approaching screen use or digital media use? The things that I'm going to talk through here, they might be helpful if there are problematic dimensions to a child's digital media use and you're wanting to make some changes. But they're also probably worth thinking about even if digital media use isn't a problem at this particular time, because it can help you, some of them can help you to kind of lay some foundations that you can draw on if issues do crop up, especially as kids get older. So I'm going to take you through 4 different strategies that might be worth thinking about. The first of these is co-use and conversation. This is really about understanding the technology use of the children who are in your care. Good research consistently points to this as being something that's really important. It might involve talking about it. What is it that they enjoy? What are they getting from it? What do they like about the shows that they watch? What do they like about the games that they play? It could also mean engaging in co-use, which basically means joining in, watching what it is that they're doing, playing alongside them, get them to show you how to play the game that they like, get them to explain the YouTube channels that they're into. It's not to say that you have to always be like hovering over a child's shoulder, you know, watching everything, but doing this sometimes is a really good mechanism for figuring out actually what is it that they're doing and trying to understand it more from their perspective. There's lots of reasons why this is worth doing and a helpful kind of strategy. One of the reasons is that it helps to answer that last question above. Are they having fun and learning in their technology use? It might be that you realize actually, you know, when they're playing with Minecraft, what they're really doing is hanging out with their friends, and they don't live close to those friends, so they don't get to see each other a lot. And so, you know, that's actually a really nice kind of social moment for them. Or maybe you realize actually when they're on Minecraft, playing with their mates. It seems to be that they're mostly fighting, and I think there's some kind of bullying going on, and there's some concerns here. And so I think we might need to make some changes about how this activity occurs or whether it occurs. Another reason why this kind of co-use and conversation strategy is really helpful is because it can make it easier to figure out and enact boundaries. It can make it easier to figure out what is it specifically that you're okay with or not okay with. Might be that you're really happy for them to watch some YouTube channels, but not others. Might be that you're really happy for them to play some games, but you don't want them engaging with the chat functions in those games or something like that. Maybe you're okay with playing some games, but you don't want them spending money in the games, these kinds of things. It could also help you to enact boundaries in ways that might feel fairer to the child. So let's say, for example, maybe on Saturday mornings, they can play Roblox or Minecraft until midday. And you come to them and you say, okay, it's 15 minutes until midday. What's going to be a good save point for you between now and then? Or how long is it until the end of the mission that you're currently doing? And they say, oh, well, I'm like 20 minutes away from the end of this mission. And you say, cool, fine, have 20 minutes in the mission. That's a good point for you to end at. The point is that if you kind of understand what it is that they're doing and how it works, then you can find ways of setting boundaries that are going to make a bit more sense as opposed to cutting them off at like the critical point or something like this. Maybe the biggest reason, though, that this co-use and conversation strategy can be really helpful is because it makes it a really normal thing to talk about before there are any issues. So technology use becomes a topic that you can have kind of open and really neutral conversations around, which means that if they do encounter challenges further down the line, especially as they get older and they get into things like having a phone and social media, it means that it hasn't only ever been a point of conflict. They know that they can come and talk to you about it or to an adult about it because there's been a foundation of talking about what happens in their digital media world in a kind of neutral way and making it something that you discuss together. Another strategy is clear and consistent boundaries. You're aiming for balance. Kids probably aren't going to find that by themselves a lot of the time. So some kind of boundaries, of course, are going to be important. What that looks like is going to change as kids get older. Generally, in my conversations with parents and in the research that I've looked at, having boundaries that are really clear and really consistent is the thing that produces the least tension. They become predictable. If everyone knows and understands in advance what the expectations and routines are, there's going to be less kind of drama around those boundaries. How do you decide what boundaries to set? Well, it's about finding things that are going to work for different kids and for different families. It's going to depend how you answered those questions above. What are the particular things that aren't working and what might need to change to improve those things? Maybe you want to make sure that there is better time for homework, or maybe homework after school is an issue. And so the thing that needs to be considered are, boundaries around what happens after school or routines around what happens after school. It's also going to depend on what you've learned from, observing and talking with a kid about their digital media use. Are they having fun and learning in their digital media use? Maybe they are spending money in games and that is a problem. And so there need to be boundaries around that. Maybe they're seeing advertising that you're not happy with and there needs to be, maybe that's something that you can turn off. Maybe there's chat features that you're not comfortable with. Maybe that's something that you can turn off, or they can play some games and not others, so on and so forth. So something that I really love when I talk with families and a lot of the research that I do about the role that technology plays in their life is seeing how like totally opposing things work in different families. So one family that I recently spoke to for a research project, they were having real troubles around homework. And so they introduced this rule where the kid could only go on the iPad once the homework had been completed. It's a pretty common kind of rule. A lot of families have that. I spoke to another family. They were also having issues around homework and they tried implementing that rule and it was a total disaster because in their case, the kid was rushing through their homework to get to Roblox, because Roblox was the thing that they were into. They were getting very stressed about whether or not they were going to have enough time after homework for doing Roblox, and so it didn't work. So they said, okay, we're not going to do Roblox on weeknights. You can go crazy on the weekend, that's fine, but in this house, Roblox, on weeknights isn't going to work. Another example would be a family that I spoke to. They were a single parent, and they found that setting their kid up with a TV show in the morning worked brilliantly. The mum could have a kind of, slower start to the day, get herself sorted, and it worked really, really well for them. Another family that I spoke to for the same project had a toddler of a similar age, and their number one rule was like no shows in the morning, because for their toddler, transitioning away from it was a real disaster, and their mornings just became like total chaos. So it can sound really annoying to say, there's no silver bullet, and I can't be like, here are the 3 rules that you definitely need to implement. But it would be really unfair of me to say that, because there are going to be households where those things don't work. And so I guess, to be really explicit, what I'm hoping that I can do instead is to kind of encourage you and empower you to say you're the best person to figure this out, because you're the person who can see what's happening in the kind of context. The last kind of strategy that I'll just talk about quickly here is settings and parental controls. So lots of different kinds of games and apps and platforms have settings, parental controls that you can turn on or off so that different features are accessible or not, different kinds of permissions can be set, these kinds of things. These can be really useful for getting rid of kinds of tension points and creating environments that you're really happy for kids to engage with. So often with very young children, carers are very frustrated with the autoplay function on YouTube, which will just go to the next video automatically. That's something that you can turn off so that it's not an issue anymore. Maybe you have an older kid who wants to play Roblox, but you don't want them engaging with the chat feature. That's something that you can turn off as well. You can also turn off in-game spending in a lot of games, these kinds of things. You can find parental controls by just Googling the platform or the game or the app and parental controls, and you'll find information. But I'm also going to show you at the end, there is a website that has really good guides to different kinds of parental controls. And again, to keep repeating myself, this is another place where it's really helpful to have a little bit of detailed understanding of what it is that kids are doing with their digital media use by playing or watching alongside them, because it can help you to understand those more nuanced kinds of things where you might want to change settings or add restrictions. Maybe you don't need to ban it outright, but there are things that you can change within an app or a platform that are going to address the issues that are concerning you. 2 things to be mindful of with settings and parental controls. One is that they're things you're probably going to want to adjust with age or developmental capabilities of children. The kinds of settings that you might have for a 7-year-old probably aren't going to be appropriate for a 15-year-old who's going to need a bit more independence. And also they are best used alongside the other kinds of approaches that I'm talking about. I think it's tempting to think like, oh, I'll just find the parental controls and lock it all down. But then we get back into that difficult situation where technology use is entirely about kind of surveillance and control, and we want it to be a thing that's also just normal and can be talked about. So trying to keep a balance of those different kinds of strategies. Oh, one last strategy also is to ask, how can screen use enrich your kids' interests? I think sometimes we can think of screen use or technology use as separate to the rest of childhood. There's technology and then there's everything else. But actually it can be really helpful to blur those boundaries and to really think about and even encourage the connections. So there's 2 ways that we can think about this. We can think about this through asking, how can digital media use enrich kids' interests and meet their needs? Maybe you have a kid that's really into, I don't know, doing crafts. Can you find some cool YouTube channels with craft tutorials? Maybe you have a kid that is really into dirt bikes? Can you find a YouTube channel that's about people doing tricks on dirt bikes? Maybe you have a kid whose good friend is moving away. Can you set up times where they chat online or play a game online together to stay connected? And then we can also think about it in the reverse. How can kids' interest in digital media be extended out to other forms of learning, play, and connection? So maybe you have a child and you want to encourage their reading, and they're really into a particular show or a particular game. Can you find some books that involve the characters from the game? Or can you go to the library and find some books that are about the TV show that they're really into? Maybe you have a child and you're really wanting to encourage their social connections. Maybe they have a friend that they play with online. Can that friend come over and play, for example? I've framed this as something that like we can do as adults for children, but actually there's lots of great research, including some colleagues of mine at the centre, that shows that kids are really good at doing this too. They often bring their interests into their digital media use, and they take things from their digital media use into their, non-digital play or social interactions. And so sometimes following kids' lead in this can be useful too. I think that sometimes we can forget to notice these things because these kinds of connections, because there's so much messaging around technology and harms, and I think we have this instinct to come at the topic with more anxiety than curiosity. But actually, there's lots of really good evidence that technology use can be fun and enriching, and it can be connected to these other things that are important as well. Okay, one more section, and then we'll briefly talk about some resources. You might have heard about screen time guidelines. These are recommended kind of time limits for kids' screen use. I wanted to just very briefly touch on these because they do come up a lot, and I think it's helpful to have a little bit of context about where they've come from and what the intention was, because it's a bit different to the way that they often get spoken about. So these screen time guidelines, the idea of it originated in the US in the late kind of 90s and early 2000s with a specific pediatric health organization, the American Academy of Pediatrics. They're now really popular or common, I should say, in a lot of different countries, but they're essentially still modeled very much on that original American Academy of Pediatrics set of guidelines. They generally come in two forms. Often there's some kind of recommendation to avoid screens or screen time for children under a certain age. Sometimes this is 18 months. Sometimes this is 2 years. France has gone hardcore and said 3 years. A helpful thing to understand about these kinds of no screen time under X limits is that they originally came from a lack of evidence about the kind of benefits of screen use for very young children, rather than a particular concern about harms. So the original kind of logic for this was that they didn't want doctors to recommend it as something that would be like beneficial for children. There was at the time, if we think back to kind of the late 90s, there was a lot of talk about kind of baby Mozart DVDs and the idea that if you play classical music, it'll like make your child into a baby genius. But there wasn't very good evidence for this, and there was no evidence that children were going to like learn a lot or their great brains were going to grow in a particular way if you played Mozart. So they didn't want doctors, pediatricians to be recommending this as something that would be very good for your 12-month-old. So it comes more from not wanting to recommend it. Often the language is that it's not recommended, as opposed to saying it's prohibited or you definitely shouldn't do it because there's something specifically kind of harmful in the activity itself. The other kind of guideline that is common is some kind of time limit for older children. Again, these vary, but it's often something like no more than 2 hours a day for children older than a certain age. Often it's 5, or again, they vary a lot. The original concern here was about primarily about physical activity, that too much time spent watching TV was taking away from children's physical activity. If you look at the Australian screen use guidelines, they're actually housed within the physical activity guidelines, so they're very much within that kind of frame of reference. There was also some concern around violent content and the fact that maybe that was leading to school shootings. That was all pretty shaky in terms of argumentation and evidence. But that was the original kind of concern behind that time limit. There's two things that are helpful to note about these kinds of guidelines. The first is that they were never meant to be like total rules. If you go back and you read the original recommendations, they all have these footnotes about how like these don't account for variation in families, they might need to be adjusted, the kind of thing that I've already talked about a lot. So, you know, you might have a kid who is like super active and on the weekend they play 3 hours of Minecraft. Does the fact that it's 3 hours and not 2 hours matter in the context of their physical activity? Like, no, probably not. The other thing to note is that the specific limits that are given, 18 months, 2 years, 2 hours, these are a kind of best guess. They're kind of a rule of thumb. They're not the product of hard evidence. So there's no evidence that says that something magical happens at, you know, 2 years and 1 month or 2 hours and 10 minutes. I think that's useful to understand because often that's not how they're presented or talked about. They're often talked about as you know, definite rules and very specific kind of hard limits. That's not to say that these might not be useful. If these are helpful for you as a kind of rough guideline, that's great, but they're definitely something to be taken with a bit of a grain of salt, really. And I think that those kinds of questions that I was talking about earlier that start from the child in front of you are going to be more helpful than these kinds of more, you know, general abstract kinds of rules. Okay, just to end very quickly, I know that Megan is going to share a list of resources, and I'm happy to share these slides as well if people are interested. But just to give you a couple of quick pointers to some specific things. In Australia, we have an organisation called the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner, which you might have heard of. They have a website that has lots of really good publicly accessible advice. They've got a lot of stuff about online safety in particular. They also have resources for parents and for kids. They have a mechanism where you can report abuse. This is maybe something that would be useful to tell like teenagers about as well. Because they can go and do that process independently if they're not wanting to come and talk to a carer about it. So knowing that there are places where they can go for help independently themselves is maybe worth pointing out. And they also have some advice around family media plans. These are kind of like templates that you might use to have conversations if you feel like making a kind of collective agreement might be a useful strategy for you. Common Sense Media is a US-based organization. Some of their stuff is behind a paywall, but a lot of it is free. And they have really good content reviews and kind of recommendations and kind of best of lists. So if you're wanting to find like 5 great shows for 8-year-olds about fairies, like they'll probably have a list that will recommend that. Or if you want the 3 best creative apps for toddlers or something like this, they have a lot of those kinds of really good recommendations. They also have guides to specific games and platforms. So if you have a kid that's really into Snapchat and you're like, what is Snapchat? They have a good guides that kind of explain the basics of different kinds of platforms. And then Raising Children, the Raising Children Network, they've got lots of resources and guides by age as well. The one that I really want to point out here, though, is internetmatters.org. This is the website that I mentioned before that has good guides to different parental controls for different games and platforms. So let's say you have a kid who's really into Roblox and you want to know, okay, what are the different settings that I can change as a guardian? They have really good, easy to understand kind of guides to that stuff. So that might be worth having a look at. And then if you're super keen and want to go deep on it, there's a book called Unlocked: The Real Science of Screen Time and How to Use It Better. This is written by a guy called Pete Etchells, who is a psychologist, and he kind of does like a deep dive into the research behind a lot of the kind of common anxieties or issues that come up a lot around screen time, and he kind of debunks them and does a really good job of explaining, taking some of the alarm out of it, I guess, and thinking about stuff in a more kind of nuanced way. So if you're super keen, then that would be worth checking out as well. But I'm pretty much at time, so I'm going to leave it there. And if people have questions, I'm more than happy to dive into some other things as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. All really, really good yarns to have. I know that as you flick them through, even just outside of my work as a parent, I kind of went, oh, yep. For all the things to regroup on. So thank you for that. We do have a couple of messages in the chat, and Jess, if you're still in the room there, I can't see at the minute because there's a couple of screens, but you feel free to yell out and ask the question, but I'm happy to ask it on your behalf. There's a couple here. So Jess works in one of our residential houses in Life Without Barriers, so for children in out-of-home care, but they're placed in a house with other children in out-of-home care, and it's staffed 24/7. Yeah, so it's not like a family-based placement, it's a residential care placement. And I guess, you know, there's ongoing conversations and sometimes battles around technology use in resi houses. So Jess says with their teenagers, so 12 plus, we know they're using devices in some unhealthy ways, but we aren't able to put in parental controls or do anything to stop what they are doing. Have you got any strategies to assist these situations besides having the open conversations and things around safe internet use and safe social media use? So these are workers who are going into the home and talking with these young people around safe use of technology.
Yeah, that's a really difficult and complicated situation, and I don't know that I have anything that's going to be enormously helpful. I guess it would depend a bit on the what we mean by unhealthy ways and the specific kinds of issues around that. I'm guessing that could mean lots of different kinds of things.
Jess, Jess, did you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So they are sexualized behaviors. We obviously have safety planning around that, but it's typically on social media. And it's one of the kids is 12 and she could be talking to a 26-year-old male, sending photos of herself, etc. This is not a new behavior. It's a long-standing one she's been doing for quite some time. We have open discussions. We do have Wi-Fi times that we turn the Wi-Fi off. But I've asked the second part of that question is, you know, around turning the Wi-Fi off and things like that. But it is like that because they're under child safety orders. We can't put in parental controls. We can't stop settings. The only thing that we have done is being able to put click the explicit content button on Spotify. But then she just uses YouTube anyway and on her phone, and that's where the barriers are with working within resis. I'm the program manager, and we have 2 houses, obviously, with more hoping to open. And yeah, it's a common thread. It's a common thing that's happening. I know it doesn't just happen in resis, but we don't actually have the access or the approval to be putting in things like what you've mentioned. So I was just wondering if you had anything else or strategies that we could use.
I mean, it kind of sounds like you're doing everything that comes to mind anyway, in terms of trying to find other ways to talk about it. As you said, you know, in a situation like that where, you know, there's more going on than just the technology use, these behaviors are coming from, you know, much more complex and deep-seated factors. They're going to find ways around technological solutions. So it's really a question about how do you get to the root of what's causing those behaviors, and that's well outside of my area of expertise, unfortunately. So I mean, I think that as a general principle is helpful to keep in mind. I've had conversations with people who do work in clinical settings with young people who are struggling, and they've talked about how they find in their practice it helpful to remember that often the technology use is the symptom, not the cause. And so trying to think about, you know, what is it that's driving these behaviors. But yeah, as I say, that's well outside of my area of expertise. So yeah, I mean, if I have any good conversations with people or think of anything, I'll email Megan and pass it on. But yeah,
Amazing. Thank you.
thanks for sharing that. I think
The
it's
other part of my question is also regarding working in resis, just because I want to make sure that we're trying to do everything we can for our young people, but also so my staff have got as many options to make decision making themselves. So we have implemented school refusal or non-school engagement or school suspensions. There's no Wi-Fi between 9 and 3 p.m. If they have data, it doesn't affect them at all. Most of the time they run out of their data in less than 2 weeks, but and want more. But is what I want to know is us doing that Monday to Friday, 9 till 3, is us doing that and turning it off, and it's saying, well, you're not at school, so we're turning the Wi-Fi off between 9 and 3, because you should be at school. That's where you should be. Is that strategy the most beneficial way of implementing that? Or do you have any other suggestions that perhaps may have had better results? And again, it's the age group 12 plus.
yeah.
So they are high school children.
Yeah, I guess are you thinking that that you're making not being at school less fun, and so trying to make that more of is that the kind of thinking behind turning
Yeah,
it
so
off?
I mean, realistically, if they're suspended or they're not engaged in school, they need to be earning or learning. That's even as a parent, like if my kid's suspended, then I give them extra chores to do, or they have consequences. They can't go out. But again, because we're in under child safety in residential houses, we can't say, well, you have to go and mow the lawns now, and you can't go to your friend's house on the weekend, because we don't control that. Like, they can literally walk out regardless of what we say. So that's where I'm like, I was listening to you say, like, how each house, you had the family that did the roadblocks was allowed, but the other child, they didn't cope with that. And obviously bearing in mind that we don't all have young people that are the same. Like, I could have a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old in the same house. So obviously there's already different rules based on the ages. But we try and make things as level as we can and meet them at the age they're at. Because even though my 12-year-old is 12, she displays a lot of behaviors of someone that's 15, 16. So it's trying to manage that bit, but taking away from that, is that a strategy? I guess I'm just utilizing your time because you're here and you're a digital person. Is this strategy the most beneficial way, or do you think that we could do something different along Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I guess my question would be, do you see it working? Like, have you seen it working, or do you feel like it's working? Do you feel like it's
Oh,
working?
look, at the end of the day, they constantly argue with us and fight with us. They don't have escalations or anything like that. And look, anyone can argue with me till the cows come home, but I don't problem with it. So it's more, is it having yes, it's having a negative effect to a degree because they're arguing with us about Wi-Fi, but then there's also that thing with, well, if they just keep getting, because they literally are teenagers, they're staying on their phone all the time, regardless. So it's that kind of thing where there might not be another strategy, there might not be another beneficial way, but if there is, I'd love to hear about it and see. Look, it hasn't made a difference to one of them who's refused to go to school nearly all year. And yeah, so it hasn't made a difference to her whether she's got it or not, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be happy to have a bit more of a chat with you, and we could talk about some of the specifics. But I guess again, yeah, it's a question of whether you see it working in that particular context or for those particular young people, and what, or are there ways that having them engage in online spaces could help you to move them towards the outcomes that you're wanting for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah,
It's
maybe
literally Snapchat and TikToks. It's not actually anything that's, and then I go, well, that's the social side of things. But then are we then encouraging them to then, like, that's what I mean. Like, you don't want them to lose social, because if they're refusing to go to school and they're obviously, as you said, like, there's a lot more reasons as why they're not at school and why they're refusing and all those things. However, and then don't want their mental health to decline. But then where's the, like, And it's probably something you can't even answer for me, but I was just like, you talk to a lot of people and you have a lot of strategies, and I was like, well, I'll just ask if there's another one.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, again, I'll if I come across any, it's a fantastic question, and I wish I had something more useful to say, but if I come across anything, I'll pass it on. I think the way that you're thinking about it is really good. It's, it's that social connections. Are you taking those away in times when they're actually really important, but how do you balance that with, with these other kinds of considerations? So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jess. And we'd be really happy to have a yarn with you too about that, the reasons for school refusal or what's going on in terms of suspensions and things like that, and other strategies there too. So a couple of ways to go about it. Thanks for asking the question. Hey, anybody else have anything for Kate today? It's okay for you just to yell it out if you are there in the background and you wanted to ask something.
I have a question, please.
Excellent. Go for it.
Kate, what do you think about, thank you for your time today. It's lovely to hear from you. Like a lot of the parents in the room, I was kind of thinking in the background of my head as well, what am I doing for my kids? But my question is, Roblox and the Australian government are putting in some restrictions on Roblox, particularly around kids under 16 and that kind of stuff. Do we think that is going to be helpful? Do we think it's enough? Should I be doing, they're turning off conversations and spending and stuff for kids under 16. Should I be doing more than that as a parent I'm a case manager in New South Wales for my kids in family placements. So should I be doing more? What more can I be doing with my carers?
Yeah, I had seen that news, but I haven't read it properly, so I have to go and do my homework and see the specifics. But I mean, it seems like broadly a positive. It seems like broadly a positive thing. I think the more that we can put these questions back on platforms and take them off parents in general is good, in the sense that there are lots of things that could be done to design technologies to be better for children and that are just going to make things easier for families. So I think that as an approach is generally a kind of positive one. I guess again I'd ask that same question in terms of do you have other concerns around Roblox other than those things that are going to be turned off? Is it just a question of the amount of time being spent? If it's a concern about the amount of time being spent, then what is it is it because of a kind of abstract concern about the time being spent, or is it that there are specific things that aren't happening? Will they, I don't know, they aren't getting homework done, or they aren't helping around the house or whatever. And so I would kind of try to flip it and think about it from those questions around what is the particular concern, because there's nothing inherently wrong about kids playing Roblox, go for their lives. It's okay, but is there a specific kind of problem that you see crop up as a result of it? And so what are the more targeted kind of interventions around that? Yeah. So, I mean, again, I don't know if that's super helpful, but.
It is. Thank you.
I think it is important to go back to that early slide that you did, Kate, around the context. What is it? What's the context for your particular environment? Yeah, because I think you'd be fair to say everybody here could think of a young person that they've been working with, or a house that they're working in, and how, Jess is the perfect example of the different, the dynamics that you're working with, particularly in these environments in residential care and family-based placements where there's multiple children of multiple ages. And, so it's complex, but the context of it is really important to continue to go back to. What is it that they're seeking, and why are they, why is that a problem, or why is that an emerging problem that you're concerned about? I think it's a really good place to start. Thank you for the session. I'm going to get your name wrong. Is it Ra? Apologies if I've got that wrong. Thank you for this session. I have the teen with ADHD who is constantly dopamine chasing. This has given me some new avenues to look into it. So thank you, Kate.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, that's another great example of the ways that this can differ a lot for different kids, like neurodivergence, right? Technology can play lots of different roles for kids who have autism or ADHD, and there can be different kinds of issues that crop up. There can also be different kinds of benefits and opportunities. I've spoken to lots of parents who have very young children with autism who find that watching a show on the iPad is a really useful way for kids to decompress if they've had a really intense day at daycare and they just need to like transition back into the home environment. Actually, you know, putting on their favorite show, something that they find very comforting, can be a really useful mechanism. And so trying to think about how technology can also build the capabilities that we want for children and young people can also be a really useful way of thinking about it. The clinician, the pediatrician who I was mentioning before, who was talking about, you know, not about trying to keep in mind that often it's the symptom, not the cause. He also spoke about that in terms of young people who might be really struggling, things like school refusal and are spending a lot of time maybe gaming. How can we think about how we can use those interests to build the capacities that we want them to have? So, you know, is gaming a useful mechanism for thinking about building, you know, persistence and tolerance for when things go wrong, or for building social relationships, negotiations, teamwork? How can you then try to transition those things into, you know, other contexts? But if they're starting in a digital context, that's not necessarily a problem. It's about what are the skills that you're trying to build. And, you know, eventually, of course, you want it to not just be happening online or on their phone, but those might be legitimate spaces where they are building skills or learning things. And so trying to have half an eye on that possibility can be really helpful.
Indeed.
Can I jump in with a final question? Just wondering if you, like we mentioned, you mentioned neurodiversity and some of those strategies. Do you happen to have access to resources specific to that around supporting young people to engage with tech, where we're able to sort of also consider their the way their brain is working and seeking it?
Yeah, look, off the top of my head, I don't, but it's such a good question, and I'll go and have a little poke around and see if I can find anything. I know that someone recently wrote a book about, I think it's like I can't remember the title, but it's about neurodivergent children and technology use. So I'll go and see if I can find the book. But there might also be more kind of resources as well that are a bit more you know, easy to quickly engage with. So I'll have a hunt around and I'll pass anything on to Megan if I see it. I think it's probably a kind of under discussed and under talked about area, but it is a really important one. So yeah, I'll have a poke around and I'll forward things on if I find them.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Excellent. And in terms of the resources, so on top of what Kate has mentioned today, I did put the links in them as Kate mentioned them through her presentation. I've also just put a PDF there in the chat of just a little bit bigger resourcing list that Kate provided us prior to the session today. So have a little look at that. But anything else that comes through, we will feel free to reach out. I'll put our email address into the chat now. Otherwise, it will be on the intranet in our Learning Without Barriers space for our staff. Otherwise, I'll get as much as I can up onto the caring space. So I'll put those links into the chat now just to make sure everybody has access to where you can find the information post this presentation. So I am aware of time, and if there is nothing else from anybody in the room, I'm going to take a moment to thank Kate very much for coming along and sharing her wisdom with us today. Really helpful, and I know the presentation, Kate's going to share the presentation with us at the end of this too. So something really important to go back on and start thinking about how that looks in your setting with the young people, the children that you're working with, and, you know, starting to think about some of those little tweaks that you potentially could make. You know, like I know at home here, potentially thinking about, just because I reckon it's time to turn off technology doesn't mean that they're in the right, their brains aren't quite ready yet. Are they nearly to the end of the stage of what they're doing? You know, like I think that's really great reflection. It's just, you know, about meeting that young person where they're at. And if it means an extra 5 minutes, it means an extra 5 minutes. So I think there's something in that. So I've got a lot of things to take away from today's presentation. So thanks very much, Kate. And thank you, everybody, for coming along today. It's so lovely to see you all. And have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, everyone.